"Sir, I need to see your boarding pass and I'd now." It wasn't the words that froze the air around me. It was the way he said it. Like I didn't belong here. Like the pilot wings on my chest were nothing more than some costume I'd stolen for a cheap laugh. The terminal was already humming with the pre-flight chaos, rolling suitcases, last-minute announcements, the scent of burnt coffee drifting from the cafe near gate C12. I was supposed to be in the cockpit in 15 minutes, doing the final pre-flight checks for Flight 482 to Seattle. But instead, I stood there in my neatly pressed uniform, my hand still gripping my pilot's duffel, as a security guard blocked my path. He was broad-shouldered, bald, with that permanent squint that comes from a lifetime of suspicion. His badge glinted under the terminal's LED lights. The other passengers streamed past us, barely noticing, though a few slowed down, sensing tension, and everyone knows tension at an airport is a dangerous thing. Boarding pass. Now. His voice was sharper this time, his stance wide, like he was ready for me to run. "I'm Captain Marcus Daniels," I said, keeping my tone even. "I'm the pilot for Flight 482. I motioned toward my uniform, the stripes on my sleeves, the laminated ID clipped to my chest. He didn't even glance at it. "ID," he repeated, "and step over here." There was something in his eyes, not caution, not standard security protocol, but something uglier. I'd seen it before, in airports, in stores, even on sidewalks. That quiet calculation that happens in someone's head the moment they decide what kind of person you are before you open your mouth. The other security staff were stationed a few yards away, but none of them stepped in. They were watching, though not helping, just watching. I could feel the heat rising in my face, the weight of every stare from the crowd. My co-pilot, Daniel Kim, had texted me 5 minutes ago, "Meet at gate. We need to talk about the fuel load." He was probably already in the cockpit, wondering why I was late. I pulled out my wallet, handed over my pilot's license and driver's license. The guard snatched them, scrutinizing them far longer than necessary. Then he asked, "Where'd you get the uniform?" The words hit me like a slap. My grip on my duffel tightened. "I earned it," I said quietly. He didn't like that answer. His jaw flexed, his fingers curling just slightly around his radio. "Step to the side. We're going to verify your credentials." "You can call my airline," I said, trying to keep my voice calm even as my pulse pounded. "You can call the gate. You can call the chief pilot. Hell, you can walk me to the plane and see for yourself." But he didn't move. Instead, he spoke into his radio, his eyes never leaving mine. Whatever he said was drowned out by the boarding announcement for another flight. I thought about just pushing past him, but I knew how that would look. A black man in an airport ignoring security? That's a headline waiting to happen. Passengers were starting to notice now. A woman clutching a boarding pass slowed her walk, watching me like she wasn't sure if she should feel sorry for me or be afraid. 2 teenage boys stood near a vending machine, their phones angled suspiciously in our direction. "Sir," the guard said again, "I'm not going to tell you again. Step aside." I took a deep breath and stepped over to the small, roped-off area next to the checkpoint. It was the kind of space usually reserved for people who'd failed bag checks or set off the metal detector, not for an airline captain in full uniform. Minutes ticked by. He was on the phone now, giving someone my name, my license number, details about my appearance. Every syllable felt like a slow bleed of my dignity in front of an audience I hadn't asked for. Finally, his radio crackled with a reply. His brow furrowed. He glanced at me, then back at the device, then at me again. Something in his stance shifted just slightly, like the ground under his feet wasn't quite as solid anymore. "Wait here," he muttered. And then, for the first time, he turned his back on me. I used the moment to pull out my phone. I dialed a number I didn't call often, but I knew it by heart. The voice on the other end answered on the second ring. "Captain Daniels? Is everything all right?" "No," I said, watching the guard whisper urgently into his radio. "And you're about to hear why." What I said next would send a ripple through the entire security team and make more than one person wish they'd thought twice before assuming they knew who I was. The voice on the other end of the line belonged to Captain Elaine Morrison, my direct supervisor, chief pilot for our airline at this hub, and someone who didn't waste time on pleasantries when trouble called. "What's going on?" she asked, her tone sharp. "I've been detained," I said plainly, making sure my voice was loud enough for the security guard to hear without looking like I was trying to put on a show. "By airport security. Right outside gate C12. "What?" There was the sound of papers rustling, a keyboard clacking in the background. What's the reason? They're questioning whether I'm an actual pilot, I said, feeling the burn of humiliation in my chest as I spoke the words out loud. Apparently, my uniform and credentials aren't convincing enough. There was a long, cold silence. Then Elaine's voice came back, lower and more deliberate. Stay put. I'm calling the head of airport security right now. And Marcus, she paused. Don't say another word to them unless I'm on the line. Copy that, I said. By the time I hung up, the guard his name tag read V. Turner was walking back toward me. His radio hissed softly at his side. He was still holding my IDs, and his grip looked tighter than before, like returning them would cost him something personal. Still waiting for confirmation, he said flatly. That's funny, I replied, keeping my voice calm. Because my chief pilot is on the phone with your boss right now. Something flickered in his eyes, not fear exactly, but recognition that the ground was shifting under his boots. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, another voice cut in from behind. What the hell is going on here? We both turned. Striding toward us was a man in a Navy suit with an ID badge clipped to his belt. Michael Barron, the head of airport security. His reputation was a mix of efficiency and intimidation. Most people didn't want him walking toward them with that look on his face. Mr. Barron, Turner began, straightening up. This individual, this captain, Barron snapped, is one of the senior pilots on the schedule today. And from what I understand, he's been detained without cause in the middle of his duty shift. Turner's mouth opened and closed like he was searching for the right legal phrase to justify himself. Sir, I was acting on suspicious behavior. What suspicious behavior? Barron demanded, stepping closer. Wearing a uniform? Carrying a flight bag? Standing in the concourse he's supposed to be in? Turner's face went a shade redder. His gaze darted toward me, then away. I thought. That's the problem, Barron said, cutting him off. You thought. You didn't verify. You didn't ask the right questions. And you sure as hell didn't need to escalate this into a public spectacle. Passengers had stopped to watch now, openly. Phones were definitely recording. I could feel the eyes on me, some filled with curiosity, others with quiet support, and a few that were harder to read. Barron turned to me, his tone shifting. Captain Daniels, I apologize for this incident. Your credentials have been confirmed. You're free to proceed to your aircraft. I nodded, my jaw tight. Thank you, but I'd like my IDs back first. Turner handed them over, his fingers brushing mine just enough for me to feel the tension in them. I could have walked away then. I could have boarded my plane, flown my route, and written this off as another ugly chapter in a lifetime of them. But something in me refused to let it end quietly this time. I glanced at Barron. With all due respect, I'm not just walking this off. I've been standing here for 15 minutes being treated like a criminal in front of passengers, my coworkers, and my crew. You can apologize, but that doesn't erase what just happened. Barron studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. Understood. We'll file an incident report, and I'll make sure Captain Morrison is present for the follow-up conversation. She will be, I said. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. It was Elaine. I answered. Marcus, I'm on speaker with Barron now, she said without missing a beat. And I want this handled before you leave this terminal today. Do you understand, Michael? Yes, Barron said aloud, looking directly at me. Turner shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing the floor would open and swallow him. Good, Elaine said. Marcus, I'll meet you in the crew lounge after your flight. I have a feeling this conversation isn't over. She hung up, and the space between the three of us felt thick with everything unsaid. I finally turned toward gate C12. My co-pilot was standing at the jet bridge entrance, arms folded, watching the scene from a distance. As I approached, he raised an eyebrow. Rough morning, he asked. You could say that, I replied. Want me to file a crew incident note? Oh, we're filing something, I said, but not the usual way. We stepped into the cockpit, and I let the familiar rhythm of pre-flight checks wash over me. The hum of electronics, the quiet clicks of switches, it was grounding, a reminder of where I belonged. But in the back of my mind, the confrontation replayed on a loop. Every look, every word, every assumption. At cruising altitude, I kept my voice professional over the PA system, welcoming passengers aboard. But when I said my name, I made sure to enunciate it clearly, almost defiantly, Captain Marcus Daniels. By the time we landed in Seattle, I had 3 missed calls from Elaine and 1 from the airline's legal department. The meeting in the crew lounge later that evening wasn't a meeting so much as a reckoning. Elaine was there, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Barron sat opposite her, looking like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. And Turner looked smaller than he had this morning, and not just physically. Elaine opened with no warm-up. "Marcus, tell them what you told me." I did. Every detail, from the first words Turner spoke to the way he refused to acknowledge my credentials. When I finished, Elaine turned to Barron. And Barron exhaled, and Turner acted outside protocol. There was no probable cause to detain Captain Daniels. "This is an embarrassment to the department and the airport." Elaine's gaze sharpened. "Embarrassment is a PR word. Let's call it what it is, discrimination." Turner shifted. "I wasn't. You were." I cut in, my voice level. "You looked at me and decided I didn't belong here. You didn't check the roster. You didn't ask the gate crew. You didn't even look at my ID before you decided to pull me aside." His jaw clenched. "I made a mistake." "No," I said, leaning forward. "You made a judgment. A mistake is forgetting someone's name or misreading a sign. This was a choice." The silence that followed was heavy. Elaine finally broke it. "Here's what's going to happen. Marcus is going to write a formal statement. Barron, your department will issue a written apology to him and to the airline. Turner, you're suspended pending retraining, and I expect you to complete bias awareness training before you set foot back on the floor." Turner looked like he wanted to protest, but Barron's hand on his arm stopped him. "This won't fix what happened," I said quietly. "But maybe it'll make you think twice before you treat the next person like you treated me." That night, back in my hotel room, I sat by the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. I'd dealt with bias before too many times to count, but this one felt different. Not just because it happened in my workplace, in front of passengers, but because this time, there had been witnesses. Cameras. A record. My phone buzzed again. A text from Elaine. "Media got wind of it. We're handling it. You did the right thing." I didn't know what would come next: interviews, statements, maybe more uncomfortable attention than I wanted. But one thing was certain. Turner's mistake had just turned into a story that would travel a lot farther than Seattle. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there would think twice the next time they felt that ugly, automatic assumption rise in their throat. By morning, the story was already everywhere. It started with a blurry 30-second video posted to TikTok by one of those teenagers I'd spotted near the vending machine. The caption read, "Security guy stops black pilot at our airport for what?" Thinking face, this ain't it. The clip wasn't long, just me standing in my uniform, Turner blocking my way, and Barron stepping in. But the audio was clear enough to catch the edge in Turner's voice when he demanded my ID, and the quiet steel in mine when I said, "I earned it." It hit 100,000 views overnight. By breakfast, it had crossed 1 million. When I walked into the terminal for my morning departure, it was different. Not the building, the air. People glanced at me, then quickly looked away, or held eye contact just a second longer than normal. Some smiled faintly. Others had that look of recognition without words. I'd just cleared crew security when a young woman in jeans and a blazer stopped me. "Captain Daniels?" she asked, holding up a microphone with a small local news logo. I froze for half a second. "Yes. Do you have any comment about the incident with airport security yesterday?" Her cameraman was already rolling. I took a breath. Every instinct told me to walk away. Pilots aren't supposed to chase headlines. But I also knew silence has a way of being filled by other people's narratives. "I'll just say this," I began. "Yesterday, I was stopped in my workplace by someone who saw my skin color before they saw my uniform. That wasn't just about me. It happens every day, to people without the privilege of a uniform or a title, and it's not acceptable anywhere." The reporter's eyes widened slightly. She was expecting a no comment. "Do you think race played a role?" "I don't think," I said. "I know." That was the clip they ran at noon. By the time I landed in Denver for my layover, the national outlets were calling. CNN, NBC. A producer from Good Morning America left a voicemail asking if I'd be willing to share my emotional journey with their audience. Elaine called me before I even checked into the hotel. "It's blowing up," she said. "Our PR team is doing damage control, but Marcus, this is bigger than the airline now." I figured. "They want to make you the face of this," she continued. "Interviews, statements, maybe a panel on diversity in aviation." I laughed bitterly. I wanted to be known for my flying, not for being detained in a terminal. I know, she said softly, but you've got an opportunity here. And if you don't speak, Turner becomes just a nameless guard, and the story fades into another social media footnote. I didn't answer right away. I thought about the faces of the young black men I'd seen in terminals, traveling alone, always a little more careful with their body language around security. I thought about the emails I'd gotten over the years from aspiring pilots who didn't see themselves represented in cockpits. All right, I said finally. I'll do it. But I'm telling my story my way. 2 days later, I was sitting in a brightly lit studio in New York. The set smelled faintly of coffee and hairspray, and my heart was hammering harder than it ever did in turbulence. The host leaned in with her practiced warmth. Captain Daniels, first thank you for being here. We've all seen the video, but tell us what was going through your mind in that moment. I told them about the shock, the humiliation, the calculation in my head of how any sudden movement, any raised voice, could be twisted into a threat. I told them about the pause in Turner's eyes before he decided I didn't belong there. And what message, she asked, do you hope people take from this? That your perception isn't always reality, I said. That uniform or no uniform, title or no title, you have to check the assumptions you make about people. Because those assumptions can ruin someone's day, or their career, or worse. They played the viral video again, this time slowed down, zooming in on the moment Turner asked where I got the uniform. I kept my face neutral, but inside, I felt that sting all over again. When I returned home, there was a letter waiting for me, hand-delivered. It was from Turner. Captain Daniels. I've replayed that moment in my head more times than I can count. I want to say I'm sorry, but I know that doesn't undo the harm I caused. I thought I was following my instincts. The truth is, my instincts are flawed. I saw what I expected to see instead of what was in front of me. I've started the bias awareness training. I know that's just a start. I hope someday you'll accept my apology. It wasn't enough, but it was something. I tucked the letter into a drawer. Weeks passed, but the story didn't fade the way most internet outrage does. Aviation blogs picked it up, calling for better diversity training in airport security. A major airline announced a scholarship program for minority pilot candidates and credited recent incidents for the push. I kept flying my routes. But everywhere I went, people recognized me. A flight attendant I'd never met before slipped me a note on a drink napkin mid-flight. Thank you for speaking up. I've been there. One night, during a turnaround in Chicago, I spotted a young black man in a crisp new uniform standing at the gate, looking nervous. First assignment? I asked. Yeah, he said, smiling shyly. Flight attendant. Just got certified. I nodded toward the plane. Welcome aboard. You belong here. He grinned wider, and for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened felt lighter. But the real turning point came 6 weeks later. I was called into a meeting not with Elaine this time, but with the airport's entire security leadership team. Turner was there too, sitting stiffly at the far end of the table. The director, a woman in a gray blazer with steel blue eyes, began without small talk. Captain Daniels, thank you for coming. We've completed our internal review of the incident. Changes are being implemented immediately. She outlined a new protocol. All detentions of airline crew must be verified through the gate manager or airline dispatch before being initiated. All officers would undergo quarterly anti-bias training, not just a one-time seminar. And perhaps most significantly, they were appointing a liaison officer specifically to handle crew-related security issues, a role designed to de-escalate situations before they became confrontations. This was overdue, she admitted. And while we regret how it came about, your willingness to speak publicly made it impossible to ignore. Turner's jaw worked, but he said nothing. When the meeting ended, he approached me in the hallway. I meant what I wrote, he said quietly. I know, I replied. Just make sure the next guy doesn't have to hear those same words. He nodded once and walked away. That night, on my flight back to Los Angeles, I thought about how strange it was that one moment 15 minutes in a terminal had rippled outward into changes I might never have imagined. I didn't forgive Turner completely. Maybe I never would. But I did believe he'd think twice the next time his instincts told him who someone was before they even spoke. And for me, that was a start. 3 months later, the incident felt like a lifetime ago, and yet it hadn't left me. I still flew my regular routes. I still checked weather reports, monitored fuel loads, briefed my crew, and listened to passengers chatter about their vacations. But every time I walked through a terminal, a small, invisible weight sat in my chest. It wasn't fear. It was vigilance. That quiet readiness to explain yourself, to prove your right to be where you already belonged. One evening, I landed a late flight into Atlanta. The terminal was half empty, the air heavy with that post-midnight stillness. As I made my way toward the crew lounge, I spotted an older black man sitting alone near an empty gate, a small overnight bag at his feet. Something about him caught my attention, maybe the way he sat upright, hands folded, scanning the space like he'd been here before. I slowed down. "Evening," I said. He looked up and smiled faintly. "Evening, Captain. You waiting for someone?" "My grandson," he said. "Flying in from Dallas. First time away from home. I wanted to be here when he landed." We talked for a few minutes. He told me he'd been a ground crew mechanic in the 70s, back when very few people of color worked airside. "You learned quick to keep your head down," he said. "Not cause you were wrong, but cause they'd find a reason to make you wrong." I nodded. I knew exactly what he meant. Before we parted, he leaned forward slightly. "I saw you on the news," he said. "What you did it matters. You think it's just about you, but it's not. It's about the ones coming after you." His words followed me into the crew lounge and stayed with me the entire flight home. The real closure came unexpectedly. Elaine called one afternoon and asked if I could come to the airport on a day off. "It's not about a flight," she said. "Just trust me." When I arrived, she was waiting near the main security checkpoint. Beside her stood Barron, and next to him, Turner. I stiffened instinctively. But Turner looked different. The stiffness was gone from his posture, replaced by something heavier. "Captain Daniels," Barron said, "we asked you here because there's something we want you to see." He gestured toward the far side of the checkpoint. A group of new security recruits stood in a semicircle, listening to an instructor. On the screen behind them was a still image from that video, me and Turner in the middle of our confrontation. The instructor's voice carried across the space. "And this is an example of what not to do. This incident led to a complete change in our crew verification protocol. It's also a reminder that unconscious bias can have public, damaging consequences for the person involved and for the department." I stood there, frozen. My humiliation was now a teaching tool. "They see this on day one," Barron said quietly. "Every new hire. Every transfer. It's part of their training now." Turner finally stepped forward. "I asked for that," he said. "Not because I want to keep reliving it, God knows I don't, but because if it can stop one officer from doing what I did, it's worth it." For the first time, I believed him. The following week, I was invited to speak at an aviation diversity conference in Dallas. I walked onto the stage in front of an audience of pilots, crew, mechanics, dispatchers, and students. Some were seasoned veterans, others were just starting out. I told them my story, not the viral version, not the headline version, the real version about the heat in my chest when I was questioned, the calculation behind every word I spoke, the quiet decision not to escalate when I had every right to. And then I told them about what came after, the policy changes, the awkward meetings, the apology letter in my drawer. It would have been easy to walk away from it, I said, to file it under another day in the life and move on. But change doesn't happen in silence. And as much as I wish I'd never been in that situation, I know this: if telling my story means one less person has to live it, then it was worth it. When I finished, the room rose to its feet. Not a polite, scattered applause, a full, sustained standing ovation. After the conference, a young woman approached me. She was maybe 22, with a fresh pilot's license still gleaming in her wallet. "I almost quit last year," she admitted. "Got told more than once that I didn't look like a pilot. But then I saw your interview. Made me think maybe I could still belong here." I smiled. "You do. And the next time someone tells you otherwise, remember their vision isn't your reality." She nodded, her eyes shining. Months later, I was walking through that same airport where it all began. My flight had been delayed, and I found myself with a rare stretch of unhurried time. I wandered past the checkpoint, now redesigned with a designated crew lane and a large sign reading "Crew Verification, see Gate Agent First." Turner was there, manning the post. He saw me and raised a hand in greeting. It wasn't awkward anymore, just human. I walked on, past the hum of rolling suitcases and the smell of coffee. The terminal was the same, but I was different. Because now, I knew this. One phone call, one conversation, One decision to speak up, it can shift the ground under an entire system. And for all the turbulence I'd faced, that was the smoothest landing I could have hoped for. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.